I'm visiting with Rand Rowe, and Rand, you make flutes in the traditional Native American way.
I try my best.
And what do you call your enterprise?
I call it Catahoula Flutes.
And there's a funny reason for that.
We had a dog that was a Catahoula, and she was a mess. And you never knew what she was going to do. So basically, I love to make branch flutes. That's one type of flute. And they're kind of that way too. You don't know how they're going to turn out until you got them done.
Well, let's talk about the first flutes that Native American people made, and what was the purpose for them?
Well, traditionally it was, I think everybody, all of mankind loves music. And so just that. But then I'm sure that it was also based on ceremony. I know that in the Lakotas, they use them as courting flutes. So a young man, if he wanted to find a girlfriend and he finds his girlfriend, and he's got to make a flute, and it's got to sound good to that young lady. And if it doesn't, then he's he's out of luck.
Well, and since he knew that there had been relationships because he's a grandson,
yeah.
They were called grandfather tuning or something quite fascinating.
Exactly right. So when he would make his flute, he would go out into the woods and take his grandfather's flute with him and look for branches, or if he was doing a branch flute. There were basically two kinds with the Native Americans, and that was the river cane flutes.
Yes.
Or the branch flutes. And so up there in the Lakotas, it would most likely be a branch flute. And so he would go out and try to find a flute that matched his grandfather's. Then he'd bring it home, and he'd start making sure it was the same length as his grandfather's. And then he would either bore it out, or use burning tools to burn it out, or he would have to break it in half with a stone knife, unless he had a steel knife. So he would take a knife that had been napped, break that flute in half, then carve out the insides with tools like that, or burn it out.
Yes.
So he would have the bore on the inside just like his grandfather's as best he could. And then he would start tuning that flute and try to get it so that it sounded the same without any holes. And then he would tune his bottom hole and the next hole and the next hole and the next hole until he had it sounded the same way.
Gosh.
And the way he knew how to lay out the holes was he would put his hand here, and that's where the first hole goes. And he would put his hand here, and sure enough, that's where the first hole goes. And he would use his thumb in between. Now this flute I did mathematically. But if you notice,
it still fits that traditional way.
It's almost exactly the traditional way.
Yes, isn't that
it's fascinating.
It is just remarkable. You have an example of how the earliest flutes would have been made, I think, where you just blew into the end.
Right.
And that's hard to get the sound of. I mean, it would take, you said it even takes you half an hour to figure out
Right. It
just
takes
how
me
to
a
do
while
it.
to get back into it because I don't play that flute very often.
But because of, I believe you said when the French came in and they had European flutes, which you do like this.
Right. And there was another style, and I think it had something to do with a fipple. I'm not sure. But somewhere along that same time, in the 1700s, they started making flutes. They're 1600s, right around there. They started making flutes with a little block on it. So that when you blow in the end of the flute, that block is forcing that air to hit a sound edge, and you got sound. So
they adapted some of the European flute methods, but they did not adapt playing it this way. They continued to play it this way.
Exactly.
And that's why your flutes have these really funky things that cover those dramatically kind of...
Yeah, they call them the block, the bird, or the fetish.
Yes.
And sometimes I use stones. I like the, ladies like rose quartz, so I put the quartz on there. And I love bears. If you look at this little guy, he's a bear.
Yes.
And so you're blowing in the end.
Yes.
The air, this is a big hollow area back here, just like the front of this flute is. And the air comes across this edge, and there's a little flat area right here, and it hits the sounding edge right there.
And I can see that there's a little chiseled spot right there, and that redirects the air
exactly
down.
It's almost shaped like a little triangle. and it just shoots that air down there, and that's how you get your sound. But if you just blew on it, all that air would just go right on out.
Yeah.
But once I put the block on, and now we'll have, so there
Goodness
all of a sudden
gracious.
you got a sound.
Yes.
So plays.
But they were grandfather tuned, so even though they were used ceremonially, there wouldn't be 5 people playing the flute because they wouldn't have lined up and sounded right. They were
Right.
all
Exactly right. And about
in different keys.
Exactly. And about 1950,
Uh-huh.
everybody decided, it'd be kind of nice if we could play together. And so they all came up with a tuning system, and they started using mechanical tuners. And so now it's a little easier to do it than the mechanical tuning. But there's a chart, and if you tune your flutes, you can pretty well play with other people.
There are lots of materials and parts of the tree that you could use for your flutes, but you're drawn to one in particular.
Right, I like the branch flutes. And I think it comes down to the challenge. I can make these routed flutes all day long. They're simple for me to make.
And you get to use machinery to do it.
Yeah, I can just knock them out. And the bore length is the same one and same length, and the holes can be all laid out the same. I can just take 50 of them and line them up and knock them out. Whereas a branch flute, every one of them requires agony and torture, and it's just, you have to, first of all, you got to get the flute cut in half, and so I use a
The piece of
bandsaw.
wood, the branch
Exactly.
cut in half.
Yeah, right. And traditionally they used other, stone tools or steel knives to split them, and then
Because
later
you
on.
can't do this on a
Exactly,
router.
because if you notice, this is a wiggly flute.
It's just
And
as
so
crooked
it's-
as it can be.
Exactly. And so I just love the challenge. And every one of them is its own unique flute. There's not another one like this. I can have another one that is in the same key, but there'll never be another one just like this flute.
Y'all have about 16 acres here near Lugoff, and you are fortunate you can wander around and let the different trees or branches speak to you, I believe.
Exactly. So we've got the hollies and the sand myrtles and the sparkleberries and the pine, of course, and oak and hickory and you name it. I mean, just amazing amount of wood. Even have a couple of beech trees. So it's fun to be able to walk out, and quite frankly, every year in February, I do go out and collect the wood for a year to 2 years down the road.
While the trees are deciduous.
Exactly.
And that's
So I will
except for the
harvest
hollies,
the
yeah.
branches that I want and bring them back and seal the ends with glue, and then let them sit in a bucket in climate controlled area for a year or two, at least a year.
And who's on the top of that one?
That's I went and looked at Smithsonian I looked at the flutes in Native American
Yes.
in the Smithsonian, and this was a woodpecker a style of a woodpecker that was done by Native Americans back in the day. It doesn't look that beautiful, but it's what the style was back in the 1800s.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I just copied that little strange looking woodpecker and put him on there.
And then other things that you have on them for decorative reasons.
Right.
Let's talk about some of those as well.
Normally there's a mark of some sort that a Native American would do on a flute, but sometimes you'll find nothing at all.
Oh,
But you can look at certain flutes made by certain people, and you can see, there's a pattern here. And
I see. Yeah.
And with all of my flutes, though, every one of them is going to have a feather here, and you see the little dots. So this is a spirit feather. And the reason why I do the spirit feather is because it represents when a person, the flute maker, makes the flute, he actually has to take the heartwood out of the flute. He's got to put his heart into the flute and put the heart back in the flute.
Replace it. How lovely.
So that's the reason why I put the feather on all of mine. And the little dots represent the flute journey. And then down here I have that New Mexico sun symbol,
Yes.
which is really my thing for the 4 directions, because the Native Americans' belief system around the 4 directions. On the back side, carve out a little guy, and that's representing me
Yes.
with my little beard. I used to have a longer beard. And I always put the key of the flute. So this is a G,
Oh, okay.
what year I made it, and then I write on it that, made by Catahoula Flutes. And so all of my flutes are set up the same way.
Do you ever play with other people?
Yes, I do. I play with my wife sometimes. And then just if we go to flute circles, that's an interesting thing. I'm glad you said that. There are flute circles all over the United States. There's the Georgia Flute Circle up in the Atlanta area, and people from all over Georgia will come together to play their flutes.
So I could find a place to go and hear how something that started thousands of years ago in one particular way and for one particular purpose has now, as we would expect, become something that changes with the times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And not only that, there are also flute festivals where people go, several thousand people will go and listen to well-known players play
Yes.
their flutes.
Okay. I want to thank you for letting me come and learn that on your little 16 acres in Lugoff, just like the Native Americans who once lived here, you are harvesting from your land and finding ways to bring joy and happiness and tradition to your life.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for visiting.